Each businesses make the earth more unsustainable because you're adding to the carbon footprint and water footprint. This is how Coca-Cola is also. But the question is, how much can you mitigate? Coca-Cola is replenishing more than 1.5 liters of water for every liter of water that they consume.
Hi everyone, welcome to the first edition of Bending the Lines, a circular lens of industries. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Shashwat Gangwal and I am the founder of Infinity Box. It is my earnest request to all of you to tune in and spread the word. Because after all the pandemics and the wars end, one war which we will always be fighting for is the one for our planet and for our future generation. Our guest for today is Mr. Amit Saha. Amit is a global level business manager with over 30 years of experience primarily in the F&B sector. He was associated with Hindustan CocaCola Beverages as Chief Sustainability Officer for India and Southwest Asia and spent over 17 years with them. Prior to Coca-Cola, he worked with Gillette and Aisha for about 10 years. Amit decided to take sustainability beyond Coca-Cola. He jumped into entrepreneurship in 2018 and founded Pro India Recycling with the aim of bringing back littered plastics into the value chain, giving them second life, and creating value. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Amit. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on our podcasts.
Thank you.
I think everybody is in awe of the amount of work that you've done in this circular economy space. You've been in the industry for more than 20 years. And I think before we dive deeper into understanding the circular economy related to the beverage industry, we would want to understand that how did the role of being the head of sustainability at Hindustan CocaCola Beverages come about? What was your personal journey to this position?
So it's like this. I had done about 20 years of my work in supply chain and engineering and a little bit of procurement and stuff like that. I'm a mechanical engineer from the 90s, actually, 1990, and I had already done by that time about 11 years of work with Coca-Cola in all different functions of Coca-Cola. My role in Coca-Cola started as a factory manager way back in 99. And then I was the operations head for a region. And then also I took up the role of a P&L head, general manager for a franchisee location before moving on to the IT space and rolling out the IT ERP for Coca-Cola India, and then even going to do that for Southeast Asia. So I had kind of a holistic knowledge of how a company like Coca-Cola operates, especially in Asia. And at that point in time, there was a huge need back in the operations, which is the Hindustan CocaCola Beverages, which is the uh, feet on street, the bottling side of operations in safety and sustainability. Water was becoming a critical issue at that time, and so was plastics to some extent. And therefore, this word sustainability came about to my CEO, and he said that, look, this is an area of importance, not only the risks inside the company, which is the quality risk, the safety risk, and the environmental risk within the factories, but also the risks which are outside the geography, but has to be managed from Coca-Cola. Those are the risks of stakeholders having a different understanding of the company and working towards the same. And that is what sustainability is all about. So I did not even know that there is something called Chief Sustainability Officer, which I was designated in way back in 2012. It was probably the first time in India that a company had a CSO position, which was given to me. So it has been a amazing journey till the point of being a chief sustainability officer, but it was even more amazing after that because the kind of exposure the CSO position brought me for Coca-Cola specifically. It was amazing also because it brought in all the roles that I had done. I had to pick out the best of my responses and in the choices that one has to make within Coca-Cola system. So there were it has been extremely satisfying, I would say, to go out there, not just within the facilities, factories, or offices, but go out there and manage a set of stakeholders uh, in sustainability. Looking at a larger picture, a long-term picture for companies' operations within the country and within the geography. So, yeah, it has been a very very good journey for me. I mean, very learning, very uh, experiential uh, stakeholder management kind of a journey. So yeah, it's good.
So you basically experienced all the roles across the entire supply chain, right? So that's quite amazing. But I think if you could just maybe get a glimpse of, let's say, one of the favorite moments or one of your the best moment as a CSO where you felt that you created the most impact, and then for sure we'll dive into the beverage industry.
Sure, absolutely. So I have about 30 years of experience, not 20, 30 years of experience in corporate world. So I'll give you an example of what we did, and this time it was very collaborative. So Coca-Cola and PepsiCo are always considered to be fierce competition uh, characters in the field, both in the market and off it. But we were both faced with a situation sometime in 2013, 2014 of having our industry becoming a red industry from pollution point of view. So this was there is a characteristics of becoming a red industry from environment point of view, which is normally given to extreme chemical industries, very large mining, steel industries, industries which are either taking out a lot of material uh, from the ground, extremely unsafe, or having a lot of chemicals within their composition. And we were in Coca-Cola, an industry which was actually doing zero liquid discharge. So basically, we were not even letting out our pollution outside our factories. So we were kind of astounded by that, a little bit shocked, stumped, and we started understanding why we have been generally put in a red category. So together we formed an association called Indian Beverage Association, which had the two biggest competitors coming
Mhm.
together to solve this problem. We sat down and understood each of our factories' footprint in terms of environment and pollution and things of that nature. And we compared it to cement, steel, and other industries which are normally categorized as red industries. And then we looked at the whole thing and presented it back to pollution control boards, the Ministry of Environment and Forest. And this was an arduous task of meeting them again and again, explaining them the rationale of why we think we should be green rather than red, and there is an orange in between anyway.
Yeah.
So, so at the end, we were able to get this thing out of the red mark out of our kind of a report card. And that was, to me, the most satisfying work in stakeholder management and government relationship, because it's the first time we were doing something at that level, but also the first time we were working very closely with competition on something which is close to our heart, the pollution and the environment, because we think that at least in Coca-Cola, there was very, very high standards of environment and safety. So very satisfying that particular example. And it was almost a year of hard work.
Wow. So I think this is what sustainability all about, right? It's not about competition, it's about collaborating, because at the end of the day, we are trying to save the same thing, right? Our environment and providing
the environment that we got to our future generation. So I think this is quite one of the best examples that anybody could have ever hoped for from a CSO. So thank you so much for sharing that. So maybe we should talk a bit more about the beverage industry, which is what the listeners are here for. So see, I think Coke is a brand which is ubiquitous. I mean, from every single village across the earth to the biggest of metros. But I think what people do not really understand is what it actually costs to the environment to get that one bottle of Coke in a retail shop, right? So what is the value chain associated with it, and what is the footprint of those major steps? Maybe if you could talk about that briefly, so that we understand the next time that we're going out to drink a bottle of Coke or Pepsi or whatever, that this is the amount of footprint that's associated with it.
Sure. So a standard LCA calculation, life cycle analysis of a bottle of Coke, uh, from the point of view of its ingredients all the way to transportation and making it available in the hands of a consumer, could entail multiple commodities and raw materials. So let me take up one example. The example of one product, which is sugar. So for producing sugar, one has to the farmer actually puts in a lot of water into the production of 1 kilogram of sugar. 1 kilogram of sugar could take up maybe more than 300 liters of water to produce a kilogram of sugar. Now I'm saying not just the sugar cane, but from sugar cane to the factories and from the consumption of water inside the factory to produce 1 kilogram of sugar. And then that sugar is coming into our factories, and we are putting that sugar into the water. And then that is not the only water which we are using in the final product, because there could be other water which is used in the utilities and in the wash cycles of equipment, as well as additional water you use to wash the containers in. And then the water goes all then a liter of Coca-Cola goes in the hands of consumer. So it's quite possible that to create 1 liter of Coca-Cola, you're like in the life cycle of creating 1 liter of Coca-Cola, which could have maybe, let's say, 20 grams or 15 grams or 10 grams of sugar. If you add all the water which has been utilized, that could reach up to 500,000, no, depending on the SKU, depending on the size. So essentially, the point is that there is a huge water footprint to create one bottle of Coke. This is not the visible water which you see while the Coke is being prepared, but also the water which is built into the products when it is getting delivered into Coke. So, like that, there could be other items, for example, carbon. That worries many of the sustainability practitioners. How much carbon dioxide this was generated while this bottle of Coca-Cola was produced. So was it the transportation of the sugar to the factory? Was it transportation of all the other materials to the factory to generate one bottle of Coke? And was it the transportation of the bottle of Coke from the factory to in the hands of consumer? And what about the all the employees who are traveling because of that, the employee travel and their no the carbon dioxide which is getting released because of that, like the air travel, the road travel of the employees and things of that nature, and the other carbon which is coming out of the generators and the electricity consumption in the factory. So there could be a huge footprint on account of that as well, the carbon footprint. So water footprint, carbon footprint, plastic footprint. These are the footprints which any product. No, these may not be just product which you can have a touch and feel, but it could be also a Google product. So if you're doing a Google ad search or Google search, there is a set of servers at the back end which could be bigger than factory in terms of consumption of electricity, and it could be the travel of Google employees all over the world to create that one search for you. So every company, when it exists and it gives out a product or service, there is a built-in carbon and a built-in water footprint attached to it, and therefore it will be not unright to say, it will not be wrong to say that each company, each businesses actually make the earth more unsustainable because you're adding to the carbon footprint and adding to the water footprint. So this is how Coca-Cola is also. But the question is, how much can you mitigate, and what are the effects that you're leaving behind, which is negating the carbon and negating the water footprint and things like that. So let me close this question with the answer, which is, let's say, talking about water. So in Coca-Cola, India and the rest of the world, there was a realization that we are producing a product which is majorly water. 95% or above is water. We are just flavoring it and adding carbon dioxide and creating functionality around the same. But if we are drawing something which is an equitable resource, and a resource which is not really available in most parts of the world, so how are we conserving it? How are we replenishing it? So the target was taken sometime in 2009 worldwide, that Coca-Cola will replenish all the water it consumes and much more. So in India, this was even bigger because between the states, there was some states were in absolute water levels were going down, and therefore taking up groundwater, and especially when you are in a village scenario, or you are amongst the other citizens who are also using the same groundwater, it was becoming a serious challenge. So two things what was done in Coca-Cola India. One was that we decided to move away from groundwater and look at more perennial source, rivers and canals for water. And second was that we decided to replenish all the water that we consume. So we had put a lot of rainwater harvesting structures to contain the rainwater and put it into the ground. So not just the factories had these structures, but we actually created lakes and ponds and bunds and gully stops for getting the water aggregated and then putting it back on ground. So today, Coca-Cola can take pride, and also it's avoiding a risk of stakeholders telling back to Coca-Cola that you are taking away more water, because Coca-Cola is replenishing more than 1.5 liters of water for every liter of water that they consume. So this is how a function of a large company is, and that's why it remains large and sustainable.
There's so many insights in that answer. This is amazing. So I think three key insights from what you just said, right? Just to summarize it for the users, and I think the most important reason I asked this question was because of this common notion that goes around, right? That it's just one plastic straw, it's just one plastic bottle, it's just one thing that I'm consuming. Why are you asking me to reduce on that? There are millions of others of people who are doing the same thing, and you can ask them. But it's what they don't realize, that each object, each material that they're talking about has its own life cycle assessment, has, like you said, sourcing, production, transport, in the in-hand consumption bit. All of that contribute to the carbon footprint, water footprint, etc. And we need to understand that it's not just us. The total amount of resources are distributed across, like you very well pointed out, and we need to ensure that everybody has access to it, and that is why manage our consumption. That is why SDG 12, I think, is one of the most important SDGs that isn't talked about as much. And the second thing that you pointed out, which was very important, is that we are all creating this footprint because we want new things. Companies are going to produce things. What are the steps you can take to mitigate that? And I think that is why this podcast series, where we talk about circular economy, where we talk about reducing both the consumption and the production to mitigate our footprint becomes very important. All these strategies taken by companies and the strategies that should be taken, adopted in our daily lifestyles, are important, so that we reduce our footprint. So I think that brings me on to my next question. That, like you pointed out, right? So Coca-Cola has been at the helm of innovations. They're replenishing more than a liter and a half per liter consumed, right? And they have their plant bottle technology. They've invested in the closed loop fund. They have the Coca-Cola Freestyle. The list of their inventions are is just endless. So I think what would be great is if you could shed some light on Coca-Cola's view on circular economy relating to, let's say, in-hand consumption. Because in other beverage industries, what I have seen is that in-hand consumption of the amount of plastics that we use, consume, etc., lead to contribute to the highest footprint. So if that's not true, then maybe we could talk about the aspect of the value chain which contributes the highest, and then what is Coca-Cola doing that to ensure that we move towards a more circular and sustainable future.
Sure. About 2012, when I became the CSO, because of that position, I had the chance of interacting with rest of the Coca-Cola world, all the other sustainability heads, and also travel a little bit to different parts of the world, especially to Europe and to US, where sustainability had already taken roots. So Europe was leading and continues to lead on some of the sustainability work that has happened. Uh, and even in plastics, this thing was simmering. The work that too much plastics has already started being generated in Europe, and it goes going into the seas. So I realized that that while in India there is still collection of plastic bottles, in Europe it takes an effort to bring a plastic bottle back from the consumer, and therefore there is a lot of consumer promotion going on, almost like 25 cents to a bottle. One is able to put out and get that money in the hands of consumer to return a plastic bottle. So plastic was therefore becoming a topic of discussion way back in 2012. And with that, when I came back and started my exercise in plastic sustainability, I realized that there are things that we can do within Coca-Cola India as well. What we have to realize, this is just a pure data point, that plastic bottles of the beverage companies are the largest polluters of plastics across the world. There are 500 billion pieces of plastic packaging, as in beverage packaging, which is generated every year, much of which is not recovered. So forget recycling when it is not even recovered in rest of the world, which means that Europe has about 37-40% recovery for these plastic bottles, and US has probably even less than 20. So you have these amount of plastic bottles which are not even recovered, and therefore if you're talking about great Pacific patch of plastics or any other landfill which has a lot of plastic, has a lot of Coca-Cola bottles, because it is the number one producer of plastic bottles, as it's the number one beverage producer. So out of 500 billion, 125 billion bottles of Coca-Cola is, is has its own part. So you can imagine it's a huge percentage. So Coca-Cola, therefore, I think, has realized that they are the largest plastic bottle producers in the world, as they are the largest beverage producer in the world. So, like Coca-Cola, many of these leading companies, whether it's PepsiCo, Coke, Unilever, P&G, Nestle, they've all taken a pledge in 2018, that in front of other leaders in World Economic Forum, that they will use a recycled component in their packaging, And Coca-Cola has taken one step further, which is what they call world without waste. So they have taken a target of not only having a recycled component in their new plastic packaging, but also recovering every bottle of Coca-Cola from around the world in 2025, which means that they will go out for looking for a Coca-Cola bottle which has been consumed, and you are now looking at about 125 billion such bottles around the world to pull it back and put it into circular economy. Coca-Cola has itself already used this plastic bottles very effectively in US and Europe, where the plastic bottles in US actually comes back baled, compressed, baled, and then reprocessed chemically as well as physically. So to towards a recycling. So there is a technology which they use. So it's almost like melting those bottles and purifying them to create almost a virgin quality resin to be used back in the plastic bottles again. Whereas in Germany and rest of Europe, there is there's another thing which is happening in addition to recycling, chemical and physical recycling, is that the plastic bottles which are used in Germany is much thicker, so that it can be used almost like glass bottles. So it can come back to the plant, get washed again, and be reused. So in both the examples, um, the idea is that there will be a lot of plastic bottles which will start coming back. And Coca-Cola is my organization that I have left, so I have a very high regard for it. That is the only organization which has taken sustainability to a level where they have said that they will recover, which is a more arduous task, more difficult task than just to recycle or use a recycled component. Plastics, of course, has a big role to play in beverage distribution, and that is the reason that beverage is growing, because it is an attractive package. It is light. It has a lower carbon footprint to travel, because glass is probably 20 times more heavier to carry the same amount of liquid inside it. But yet, one has to have a circularity built in for companies, so that if the companies altogether are able to not let this 500 billion plastic bottles go into the sea, into the oceans, then we will not only have a circularity, we'll have a sustainable future. Those plastics heaps and mounds will not be just aggregating in the environment. They will be actually dissipating and coming back into circular economy. So I think that is a way to go, and that is something that I am in Pro India targeting, at least for India for now, to build a circular economy for India for plastics.
Wow, thank you for that, because these are astonishing figures, right? When you're talking about 500 billion pieces of plastic packaging, and most of it not being recovered. So, but I think what you brought out is one of the major notions that we are tackling across the board, right? As circular economy entrepreneurs, that plastic isn't bad. Like you said, it's light, it's cheap, it's durable, right? It's just that the entire supply chain is broken, that they're not recovered, they're not recycled, and that's why they either get dumped into the landfills or get incinerated. But I'm actually off all the initiatives that you talked about that Coca-Cola is undertaking, because they're actually going ahead and ensuring that it is reused, collected, and then brought back into the value chain. So this is amazing for from the circular economy point of view, and I think this is one of the best steps we could take to move towards a sustainable economy. But so I think the next question that I have is to understand that what are the challenges that a company at the scale of Coke, right, a Fortune 100 company, face when they're trying to implement such initiatives? Because you see, in this market, which is somewhat of a duopoly, right, like you pointed out, where shareholders want higher dividends, where profits, there is no options for profits not increasing. So, are there times when these sustainability measures maybe take a back seat?
On the contrary, I would say that sustainability is taking a front seat now. Look at Unilever. It has decided to take away almost 10% of the SKUs off the shelf because it is plastic intensive. Look at Dow
Yeah.
Jones Sustainability Index, which rewards companies, and companies get rewarded in the market by a higher valuation because they are more sustainable. They have a longer view. Look at some of the banks in not only in the rest of the world but also in India, which have sustainability as their front end agenda, and the risk managers are looking for those products and those companies which probably will be able to withstand the shock of a VUCA world. In this VUCA world, you can only see such strong responses, sudden responses, and shifts in consumer preferences, and the leaders themselves being very radical in some views, including sustainability. So, look at our own country, where our prime minister had taken a decision to actually put a ban on single-use plastics, and the whole industry was shaken because what would you do without a Swiggy container which is plastics when it has to come and deliver food at your doorstep, and not at your doorstep but 42.5 million others in a month. So you're talking about container, the container top, a piece of a spoon and a fork which goes with it, which means about close to about 200 million pieces of plastics. And what will you do when you ban it? How will your food get delivered? What is the option of a plastic straw or a stirrer or a earbud, things like that? I've been talking to some of these manufacturers of plastic bags or plastic straws, and some of the companies which are heavily into plastics, for example, P&G, Unilever, and others, which have sachets which has plastics. So, if they are not thinking about sustainability, they are going to simply perish. The volumes are going to take a huge hit because if those products of which are packaged in plastics are not allowed, which is a clear possibility, then what is the existence of the organization itself? So. I see a very strong leadership emerging on the back of sustainability. Paul Pullman of Unilever has been at the forefront of it now that he's retired. But we have seen a very, very strong leaders coming up and taking sustainability on the forefront, and they think that sustainability uh, is equal to longevity of the company with the SKUs. So I don't I have absolutely contrarian view on the same, that uh, in these times in the rest of the world and especially in India, sustainability is the key thing to differentiate, not just differentiate your product from the second person and able to market it, but also to sustain your own product lines and grow your own company. So, I mean, I can give more and more examples of it, of how company is able to sustain longer while looking at sustainability parameters and taking that as into their stride, rather than seeing that as an additional expense or work which will only have to take a back seat in the times of difficult times when the economy is bad, or when the whole effort is on the profit and increasing the revenue of the company. In a world where we are not seeing double digit growths anymore, including India and China. So I can come up with more and more examples, but I think, and I very strongly think, that sustainability is at the forefront at this point in time.
Very insightful, and I think I mean, the examples that you gave are of the biggest companies there are, right? So, which have the, like, I think in the one of the heaviest carbon footprints and plastic footprints there is. And I think what you pointed out is how markets are evolving to incorporate sustainability. So ESG norms is one of them. And the reason I asked you that question was to understand what kind of an importance do like ESG norms, do these sustainability measures that company like Unilever, Coke, etc. are taking, how are they rewarded by the market? So, and from what we are understanding from you, that in the short term it might have a slight negative effect or no positive effect, but in the long term, to sustain, to be there in the business, you have to take up sustainability measures, because market is rewarding it, and the consumers are also becoming aware of these footprints that each and every product has on a daily basis. So I think, very rightly said, we definitely need to adopt these sustainability practices to ensure that in the long term we don't perish.
Thank you so much for joining us. This part of the two-part episode was filled with enriching information, wasn't it? The second part focuses on Amit talking about regulators' push for a sustainable environment, why he took a plunge from the corporate world and ventured into starting PRO India Recycling, and his message for all the budding entrepreneurs in the sustainable and circular space. We hope you keep listening.